You don't expect your life to fall apart on a Wednesday morning. But mine did. My name's Curtis, and I've been married to Emily for 12 years. We met in college, she studied psychology, I was in pre-law. We weren't perfect, but for most of our marriage, I thought we were solid. Real. Built on something lasting. But I was wrong. It started with something small. Over the past few months, Emily had changed. Not in a way you'd immediately notice, but when you live with someone, when you know the rhythm of their laugh, the shape of their silence, you see the shifts. She started staying late at work more often. She'd lock her phone, something she never used to do. The intimacy slowed. Conversations felt clipped. She stopped touching me for no reason. You know, those little arm squeezes, forehead kisses, the stuff that keeps a marriage warm. And I tried to explain it away. Stress. Work. Hormones. Life. I didn't want to believe there was something darker under the surface. But the gut always knows. It whispers before it screams. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Emily said she had to go help her best friend Hannah with a family emergency. The story was so vague it was practically see-through. I asked a couple of questions, nothing intense, just the kind a normal husband might ask. Is everything okay? Should I come with you? Want me to call and check in later? Her answers were robotic. No, it's fine. Just something I need to handle alone. And with that, she kissed me on the cheek, not the lips, and left. No bag. No change of clothes. Just her purse and phone. I sat in that living room for the first few hours just waiting. I watched the time crawl. Midnight came. Then 2 a.m. No messages. No missed calls. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried Hannah. She didn't answer either. My mind spiraled. Was she hurt? In trouble? I checked local hospital logs online. Nothing. Then the fear turned into something worse. Suspicion. At 6:30 the next morning, I drove to Hannah's place. I knocked. No answer. I waited. Still nothing. I left a note in her mailbox, pretending I was concerned for Emily's safety. That evening, still no word. That's when something inside me snapped. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just clear. Crystal clear. She didn't want me to know where she was. And that could only mean one thing. So I did something I never thought I would. I opened the locked drawer in my home office. The one with the emergency envelope labeled, just in case. Inside was a flash drive. I'd placed it there 2 years ago after my friend Mark, a private investigator, convinced me to install some basic security software on all our devices. Not a spy, he said, just to protect yourself. Trust, but verify. I plugged it into my laptop. The software had autologged data from Emily's phone and synced it weekly to a hidden folder. Text messages. Call logs. Location pings. What I saw made my hands go cold. The last message she sent was to a contact saved under Carl Jim. I had no idea who that was. The messages weren't explicit at first, but the pattern was obvious. Flirty emojis. Plans to meet. Inside jokes I didn't recognize. Then a message that hit me like a shovel to the chest. I told him I'm with Hannah. You were right. He doesn't suspect anything. That was from her. To him. Sent 30 minutes before she left me the night before. Everything inside me dropped. The air got thin. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just disconnected. I called into work and said I'd be taking some personal days. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it simply, Exit Plan. By nightfall, still no word. Still no Emily. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I booked a one-way ticket to Austin, Texas. My cousin Nolan lived out there and had been asking me to visit for years. I called him up and said I was coming, but didn't tell him why. He could hear it in my voice. He just said, I got you, man. Come. I packed 2 bags. Just clothes, my laptop, documents, and the wedding album, not out of sentiment, but because I knew it would remind me of the man I used to be. The one who believed in forever. I turned off my phone, left my ring on the kitchen counter, and walked out. At exactly 8:10 the next morning, I boarded a flight out of town. She returned home 4 hours later. But by then, I was already gone. The moment I stepped out of our front door, it felt like I'd exited a movie where I was never meant to be the main character. Like I'd walked off a stage mid-performance, leaving the audience confused, the script unfinished. But I didn't care about the ending anymore. I cared about peace. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even lock it behind me. I left the key inside the drawer with the old takeout menus, the drawer she always forgot about. There was no goodbye note, no dramatic message. Just silence. The same kind she'd been giving me for weeks. The cab pulled up quietly. As I slid into the back seat, the driver asked, "Airport?" I nodded once. That was all. On the way, I stared out the window, not at the city but through it, like I was floating outside myself. My thoughts kept drifting to the coffee mug I'd left in the sink. The navy one with the chipped edge she always teased me about. Funny how the most ordinary things take on new weight when you know they'll never be seen again. We used to have breakfast together every Sunday. Bacon, blueberry pancakes, black coffee, hers loaded with cinnamon. Those mornings felt like ritual, like something sacred. Lately, she just scrolled through her phone and mumbled about being too full for food. I'd be lying if I said I didn't see this coming. I just didn't want to admit it. At the terminal, I checked in, passed security, and sat by gate 22 with hours to spare. I didn't read, didn't listen to music. I just watched people, couples hugging, parents wrangling sleepy kids, business travelers with their dead eyes and carry-outs. I wondered if any of them had left someone behind without a word. Maybe I wasn't the only ghost walking among them. Nolan met me at the Austin airport around 4 p.m. He's my cousin, but more like a brother. Big guy, former Army, doesn't ask questions unless he has to. He hugged me, didn't say a word until we got to the truck. Then he handed me a bottle of water and muttered, "She do something, or you finally woke up?" I laughed. First real laugh in weeks. Little of both. He didn't press. He just drove. That night at his place, I finally turned my phone back on. Dozens of missed calls. From Emily. From Hannah. Even her mom, who I hadn't spoken to in months. Voicemails flooded in one after the other. I didn't listen to a single one. Not yet. Instead, I made myself a sandwich, turkey, mustard, no cheese, and sat on Nolan's back porch under the Texas sky. I stared at the stars until I started feeling human again. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I breathed. Deep, real breaths. The kind you don't realize you've been missing until they're back. Nolan handed me a coffee, black, and we sat in silence. Then he reached into a drawer and slid over an old notepad. "Write it all down," he said. "Not for her. For you." So I did. For 3 hours, I poured everything out. Not just what she'd done, but what I had lost long before her betrayal. Myself. I wrote about the time I caught her staring blankly at me during dinner, like I was a stranger. About the way she flinched when I touched her arm last month. The way she refused to make eye contact when I asked her if everything was okay. How I told myself over and over that this is just a phase, even as I felt the marriage bleeding out one small slice at a time. Then, just as I finished writing the words, "I am done," my phone lit up again. A new message. From her. Only this time, it wasn't a voicemail or a missed call. It was a video. Just 5 seconds. Her face. Crying. "Please, come back. I don't know where you are. I'm sorry. Please." I watched it twice. Then I noticed something strange. She wasn't in our house. She was somewhere else. Somewhere unfamiliar. The curtains were different. The walls painted blue instead of beige. A tiny light fixture overhead I'd never seen before. Her hair was wet. Her voice cracked. Her eyes darted to someone off camera just before the video ended. She was lying. Again. But this time, I wasn't going to chase the lie. Instead, I did something that would change everything. I called Mark, my friend who'd helped me install the software before, and told him everything. He paused, then said, "Send me the video. I'll trace the metadata." And just like that, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just running anymore. I was preparing. Because the truth wasn't behind me now. It was straight ahead. And I was ready to meet it. Have you ever looked at someone you loved and realized they've already left? Not physically. Not yet. But emotionally, spiritually, they walked out months ago and didn't bother to close the door behind them. That's how I felt watching that 5-second video on my cousin's porch. Her eyes begged, her mouth shook, but the backdrop told a different story. The walls, the curtains, the dim yellow light above her, none of it matched our home. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She was reaching because something had gone wrong. And suddenly, I wasn't just a husband who'd been lied to. I was the only person who knew she was still lying. Mark texted back 15 minutes after I sent him the video. Video geo coordinates embedded. Hotel. Outside our town. Name starts with Windsor. A hotel. Of course. I didn't reply. I just stared at the text until the letters blurred. Emily didn't come home after her friend emergency. She spent the night in a hotel and only decided to panic when she realized I was no longer where she left me. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it arrives like a slow leak in the ceiling, drip by drip, until the roof caves in and you're left standing in the mess, holding a bucket that's already full. Nolan came back out with breakfast tacos and saw me staring at the phone. You find something? Yeah. She with someone? She was. Probably still is. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't need to. Instead, he sat beside me and asked, so what do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know. Every instinct in me was screaming, drive there, confront her, see it with your own eyes, make her say it out loud. But another voice, quieter, but stronger, said, you already saw enough. What more do you need to destroy yourself? Still, curiosity is a dangerous drug. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to watch her. Mark offered me access to a secure system he used for his firm, something discreet. He pulled hotel guest lists, surveillance snapshots, keycard logs. Emily had checked in at 8:43 p.m. the night she disappeared. Room 215. Checked out at 8:02 a.m. the next morning. Just 25 minutes before she sent me that video. I asked Mark if he could get more. He said yes, but warned, what you're digging for, it's gonna cost you something. Not money. Something else. I knew what he meant. I was about to become someone I didn't recognize. But I kept going. Mark sent me a still image. Security camera, third floor hallway, timestamped 10:09 p.m. It was Emily. Hair tied up. Wearing a gray hoodie I didn't recognize. Carrying one small overnight bag. And next to her, a man. Tall. Maybe 40. Broad-shouldered. He had his hand on the small of her back like it belonged there. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel, until I caught the unmistakable sight of her smile. The kind she hadn't given me in months. I dropped the phone. Nolan picked it up and didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. But this isn't the part of the story where I burn down bridges and go full scorched earth. That's not who I am. I don't want revenge. I want clarity. So I did something else. I made a call not to Emily, but to my office. I requested that my upcoming cases be reassigned. I told them I needed indefinite time away. I said the words, family emergency, and it didn't even sting. Because it wasn't a lie. Later that afternoon, I drove to the Windsor Suites, the hotel Emily had used as her hideaway. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the parking lot for a full hour. The room she stayed in was on the second floor, blinds closed, windows locked. It looked like every other room on that row. But I stared at it like it owed me something. A truth. A confession. A reason. I didn't get any of those. What I got instead was a realization. If I stayed any longer in that parking lot, I'd become the kind of man I didn't want to be. So I turned the key and drove off. That night, back at Nolan's, I opened a new notebook. Not the one for journaling. This one was for strategy. I wrote 3 names. Emily. Hannah. Unknown man. Windsor Hotel. And beneath that, I wrote one word in all caps. Motive. Because if I was going to move forward, I needed to understand the why, not for closure, not for justice, but to make sure I never let this happen again. Not with her. Not with anyone. And for the first time since I walked away, I didn't feel broken. I felt dangerous. I didn't sleep that night. Nolan's guest room was quiet, the ceiling fan ticking in a soft rhythm, but my mind kept rewinding the same 5 seconds of that surveillance image, her face beside his, her lips parted in a half-smile, like it was the most natural place in the world to be. You think you'll rage, you think you'll break things when you see proof. But it was worse than rage. It was this cold, numbing emptiness that crept up through my chest like cement being poured inside me. The truth wasn't just that she had lied. It was that she'd rehearsed it, planned it, replaced me, not spontaneously, but methodically. Like I was a shirt she grew tired of wearing. By morning, I had one goal, to know who he was. Not because I wanted to punish him. That's not who I am. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to understand the ecosystem she had built behind my back, the world she visited while pretending to be in mine. Mark, my friend and now unofficial investigator, texted mid-morning with a name. Brett Mathers. 39. Works in regional sales. Lies 40 minutes outside our city. Divorced, no kids. Gym membership, 2 speeding tickets in the last year. And, here's the kicker, attended Emily's old high school. They'd known each other. At least vaguely. That explained something and raised more questions. When did they reconnect? Why him? Why now? I opened Facebook. Searched his name. His profile was locked down tight, but I found a group photo from a high school reunion 2 years ago. There she was, 2 people away from him. Emily, in a black dress, holding a wine glass, looking relaxed, almost smug. I had never seen that version of her. It was like catching a stranger living inside someone you thought you knew. I closed the app. My stomach twisted. I stepped outside and walked along the edge of Nolan's property. There's a field that runs for a few acres behind his place, quiet except for the rustling of trees and the occasional hum of a truck on the nearby highway. I used to come here as a kid, chasing fireflies in summer, hiding in tall grass just to be alone. Now, I stood there as a man with nowhere to run, not because I was trapped, but because I no longer needed to. For the first time, I didn't want to fix her. I didn't want to win her back. I wanted to face the part of myself that allowed this version of my life to go unquestioned for so long. How had I not seen it sooner? What was I looking at while she was slipping away? Later that afternoon, Mark called again. "Thought you should see this," he said. He emailed me a screenshot. A second video file Emily had uploaded to her cloud account. Not the one she sent me, a different one, timestamped the night she was gone. A selfie clip, maybe taken while she was getting ready. She spoke directly into the lens. "I just needed one night," she said. "One night to breathe, to feel like I still matter." Curtis wouldn't understand. He never asks. He never really sees me anymore. I know this is selfish, but I don't want to feel invisible anymore. I watched it 3 times. Then I hit pause and stared at her frozen expression. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most. It was the casual justification. Like what she was doing wasn't cruel, just necessary. As if I had driven her to it with my silence, my steadiness, my trust. I wanted to scream at her reflection, to ask her if she ever stopped to think about the me in this equation, the man who stood by her, defended her, paid half the bills and gave all of his time, who bent and bent without ever snapping. But I didn't scream. I just sat there, still. Because maybe she never really saw me either. That night, I didn't write in the notebook. I didn't plan. I just thought about the man she left behind. The version of myself who would have forgiven her, blindly, begged for therapy, blamed himself for her decision to disappear. But that man was fading, replaced by someone quieter, sharper. Not colder, just more awake. At around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from her. Short. Desperate. "Curtis. Please. Call me. Just once." I didn't answer. I watched the screen fade to black. She was still trying to pull me back into a conversation I was no longer willing to have. One where she controlled the pacing, the narrative, the tears. But this story didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to me. And in the morning, I would decide what came next. Because leaving the house was just the first step. The real escape was still coming. And this time, she wouldn't even see it happen. I didn't expect her to find me. Not so soon. But 3 days after I disappeared, while I was sitting on the back deck with a coffee gone cold in my hand, Nolan stepped outside, phone pressed to his ear, and said 2 words I wasn't ready to hear. "She's here." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat frozen, staring into the stretch of land beyond the tree line like I hadn't heard him at all. He lowered the phone slowly. "She showed up in town. Said she was looking for a rental car she left in Austin. But Curtis, she's not here for the car." I knew that. I knew at the moment the text changed tone, from frantic to guilt-laced, to suddenly sweet and nostalgic. She had figured out where I was. Probably called Nolan's sister, maybe even tracked my phone before I turned it off. It didn't matter how. It only mattered that she came now, after the silence had swallowed everything. By the time I walked through the screen door and stepped into Nolan's hallway, she was already there. Emily, standing in the entryway like someone visiting a house she used to live in. Her hair was pulled back the way she wore it when we first met, makeup faded, and her eyes, usually sharp, were puffy and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. Not to silence her, but to pause the moment. I needed time to catch up with the sight of her. After everything, I didn't expect her to still look familiar. "Curtis," she said quietly. "I didn't come to fight." I nodded, not because I believed her, but because I wanted her to continue. She took a step forward and glanced around, as if trying to read the house, the temperature of the air between us. "I panicked," she said. "When I came home and saw you were gone. No note, no message, it felt like something had exploded. Like I'd pushed it too far." "You did," I said, calmly. She blinked. "I know. I'm not here to make excuses. I thought if I could explain." "Explain what?" I asked, genuinely. "That you lied to me, left for the night, stayed with someone you've clearly been seeing, and then tried to film a fake apology video in a hotel bathroom before I could find out?" She flinched, just slightly. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but instead, She folded into herself. Her arms crossed. Her posture dropped. I didn't plan it like that, she said. I didn't go there thinking I was ending us. I needed space. I almost laughed. Space? You had space. I gave you space every day for the past 6 months while you drifted into silence. While I cooked dinner for someone who no longer sat down at the table. While I watched my wife become a roommate. You stopped seeing me too, she said suddenly, voice tightening. You were always buried in work. You'd come home tired, and when I wanted to talk about how I was feeling, you'd shut down. That part hit differently. Not because she was right, but because she believed she was. And in her version of this story, that was enough. She wasn't the villain, she was the neglected wife rediscovering her worth. I let her talk. Not because I cared to hear the excuses, but because I wanted to understand how far she'd gone into the fantasy. She talked about Brett like he was a mistake she barely recognized, just a man from the past who offered her attention. She said the hotel night was a blur, that she cried afterward, that it meant nothing. But I'd seen the video. The one she didn't know I had. And people don't record selfie clips before meeting someone in secret unless they plan on justifying it later. The truth was, she expected forgiveness. She always had. Not because I was weak, but because I was steady, predictable, loyal. The kind of man she assumed would still be there, even after the fire. But I wasn't. You're not coming back, are you? She asked finally, her voice cracking. That's when she realized she had come too late. That this wasn't a pause in our marriage. This was a door closing. No, I said. I don't think you came here to fix anything. You came to rewrite the ending. She stared at me like she didn't understand. So I clarified, gently, you wanted me to say I forgave you. That we could go to counseling, rebuild something from the rubble. But Emily, I saw the version of you that lived without me. You smiled. You laughed. And I didn't recognize that woman. That means it's over. For the first time, she didn't respond. She just stood there, still and small, like someone mourning a person who hadn't died, but was never coming back. Nolan stepped in then, respectful but firm. You should go now. Emily didn't argue. She walked out slowly, not looking back. And I didn't watch her go. I stared at the floorboards, where her shoes had left tiny flecks of dust. That's what she'd become to me, evidence that she had once stood in the same place, but no longer belonged there. When the door closed, something inside me settled. It wasn't closure. Closure's a myth. But it was something better. Silence that didn't ache anymore. After she left Nolan's house that morning, silence settled in a way it hadn't before. Not like emptiness, more like clarity. There was no more fog. No waiting for her explanation. No rehearsing what I'd say next. The performance was over. The audience had gone home. All that remained was the aftermath. But it wasn't devastation. Not anymore. It was reconstruction. I walked through the house slowly, not because I didn't know where I was going, but because I needed to feel every footstep. To reclaim space. It's strange how betrayal isn't just emotional, it's physical. Her presence had haunted the air, the rooms, the furniture. I realized I'd spent days breathing shallow, like I'd been subconsciously holding in grief. Now, I exhaled fully for the first time. The floor didn't creak the same. The light came in different through the kitchen window. It wasn't a house where I was hiding anymore. It was a house where I was healing. Later that day, Nolan left for work, and I stayed behind, sitting at the table with my laptop open. I didn't want to scroll through memories or rewatch surveillance. I wanted to erase the noise. But something kept gnawing at me, not about Emily, but about me. What had I become while trying to keep her happy? What parts of myself had I quietly shut off in order to keep the marriage intact? When someone betrays you, it doesn't just make you question them, it forces you to face every version of yourself that stayed quiet for too long. So I made a new folder on my desktop and titled it, Recovery. No passwords. No secrets. Just a digital place to begin again. I started by writing a letter, not to Emily, but to the man I used to be. The man who dismissed red flags because he didn't want to seem insecure. The one who over-explained everything so she wouldn't get defensive. The guy who gave her the benefit of the doubt when the stories didn't line up, not because he was naive, but because he believed in love more than he believed in patterns. I wrote until my hands cramped. Until it didn't sting anymore. Until every word felt like a truth I had buried too long. The strangest part came after. I walked outside, into the middle of Nolan's field, and just stood there. Still. Hands in my pockets. Sun behind the clouds. No wind. And for maybe the first time since this began, I didn't think about her. I thought about time. About how many hours I had spent checking my phone, waiting for her text, anticipating her mood, about how much life I had given to someone who stopped giving it back. And then, like something primal took over, I closed my eyes and screamed. Not out of pain, but release. It echoed across the empty space like a crack in the sky. Birds scattered. Somewhere in the trees, a dog barked. But no one came running. No one judged it. That scream didn't need to be understood. It just needed to exist. When I came back inside, I felt something click. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just a shift. That night, I cooked. Not for anyone else. Not rushed. I made grilled vegetables and salmon, seasoned like I used to before life got too busy. I played an old playlist, not one we shared, but one I made years before we even met. There were no sad songs. No nostalgic ballads. Just rhythm. Motion. Forward. After dinner, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called my sister, Nora. She had always been the one who saw through people before I did. When I told her what happened, she didn't react with shock, just quiet understanding. She told me she'd always suspected Emily was drifting emotionally. She'd seen it in her posture at family gatherings, in the way she responded with practiced laughter but never real warmth. And then Nora said something that stuck with me. Sometimes, Curtis, people don't betray you because they hate you. They do it because they stopped seeing you as real. That line echoed long after we hung up. I thought back to that selfie video Emily recorded in the hotel, the one where she said she felt invisible. But maybe it wasn't me who made her feel that way. Maybe she'd already started disappearing on her own. Maybe all I did was stand still while she faded. I ended the day by writing one last sentence in my notebook. Healing begins when you stop expecting the apology to change anything. And as I closed the book, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for her to come back. Not for her to understand. Not for anything. I was already moving on. I didn't pack right away. You'd think that after everything, after her betrayal, after watching her walk out of Nolan's house with her apology still echoing in the hallway, I'd be racing to collect my things, to reclaim what was mine. But I waited. Not out of hesitation. Not because I wanted to see her again. I waited because I wanted to leave differently than I arrived. Most people leave a relationship with noise, arguments, final words, scorched earth. I wanted something quieter, something permanent. You don't always need explosions to make sure someone never forgets you were there. Sometimes all it takes is silence and the knowledge that they don't get to follow you into your next chapter. I returned to the house one week after Emily found me. Nolan drove me into the city just after dawn. The neighborhood was still asleep, and the sun hadn't burned through the morning haze. Everything looked the same. Too same. The manicured lawn. The gray mailbox with the crooked flag. The ivy crawling around the porch railing. All of it felt too small, like I had outgrown a space I used to kneel inside. When I stepped through the front door, I expected something to feel different, anger, sadness, some final surge of nostalgia. But instead, I felt absolutely nothing. The same way you feel when you walk into a hotel lobby you've been in before. Familiar, but irrelevant. I scanned the room, the kitchen, the hallway, and saw it for what it was, a place where a story ended. And I wasn't going to pretend to still belong inside it. I didn't take much. A few boxes of books. My passport. Old photographs from a drawer Emily never opened. I left behind the wedding china, the couch we picked out during our happy phase, and even the framed photo of us on the Amalfi Coast, the one she posted online with the caption forever. That word meant something to me back then. Now it looked like a joke someone forgot to finish. I found my ring on the nightstand, not where I left it. She must have moved it, or maybe held it for a moment, thinking it meant something. I picked it up, not to keep, but to return. I slid it into a plain white envelope, wrote her name on the outside with a black Sharpie, and placed it gently on her side of the bed. It didn't need a letter. It didn't need a speech. That envelope said everything. This doesn't belong to me anymore. Neither do you. Before I walked out, I stood in the center of the living room and just listened. The hum of the refrigerator. A distant dog barking. The subtle creak of the floorboard beneath my left heel, the same one that always groaned during late-night arguments when I paced. It was like the house was still trying to speak, still rehearsing the scenes that once lived here. But I'd stopped listening. I closed the door behind me, locked it with my spare key, and slipped the key into the mailbox slot. No note. No goodbye. Just clean lines. We drove away in silence. Nolan didn't ask questions. He knew this was the version of me that didn't need processing anymore. The part that had burned through confusion, grief, rage, and now stood alone in a kind of peace that only comes after total loss. That night, back at his place, I booked a one-way flight to Oregon. Why Oregon? I'm still not entirely sure. Maybe because it was far. Maybe because I'd always said I wanted to see the coastline there, the foggy cliffs, and the water that didn't care who you were or what you'd lost. Nolan handed me a bottle of bourbon, nodded once, and said, "You're not running. You're just going somewhere she can't follow." He was right. I wasn't running. I was erasing footprints. Not in anger. Not in fear. But because some chapters don't get rewritten. They just stop mid-sentence, and you close the book before they ruin the rest of your story. And the next morning, I was gone. Not like she had been for 24 hours. Not as a threat. Not as a warning. But as a man who chose not to come back. Oregon wasn't what I expected. The first morning I woke up in that quiet coastal town, the air smelled like salt and pine. The sky was low, pressed against the sea, and the wind came in sideways through the gaps in the cabin walls. I didn't unpack right away. I didn't try to start over, not in the way people mean when they say it out loud. I didn't make a list of goals or journal new affirmations. I just sat on the back steps of the rental house, wrapped in a sweater I forgot I owned, watching the fog roll in across the rocks. It was the first time I'd been alone without feeling lonely. I spent days walking. Just walking. No destination, no headphones, no calls. I watched seabirds dive into waves and thought about how they never second-guessed the fall. I watched driftwood pile against cliffs and thought about how even broken things wash ashore somewhere. I started to feel like I wasn't lost, just placed somewhere I wouldn't have chosen, but still somehow needed. Every so often I'd see couples along the trails or sitting in cafes. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel jealous. I just felt separate. Like I'd already lived their version of things and was now watching from the other side of the glass. There's a kind of clarity that only comes after everything collapses, a freedom that shows up not with fanfare, but with stillness. I met a few people, mostly strangers with kind eyes and soft questions. There was an older man named Russell who ran the bookstore in town, one of those places that smells like damp paper and cedar. I spent hours there without buying anything, and he never asked me to leave. One day, he handed me a worn copy of East of Eden and said, "Some books aren't about escape. They're about seeing yourself clearer." He was right. That book wrecked me, but not in a bad way. It made me remember the man I used to be before I began orbiting someone else's gravity. A man who once believed in building things slowly, deliberately, who saw love as partnership, not performance. Weeks passed, maybe more. I didn't track the days. I cooked my own meals. I stopped checking my phone. I built small routines, coffee before the tide came in, reading before sleep. And somewhere between all of that, I started becoming someone I hadn't met yet. Someone I liked. Eventually, I got a job helping out at a local shop, nothing fancy. Just moving boxes, stocking shelves, talking with customers. And in that simplicity, I found a kind of dignity again. Not because I was proving something, but because I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was just being. And then one evening, when the rain had stopped and the horizon looked like it was on fire, I saw her. Not Emily. Someone else. She was walking her dog near the cliffs. We crossed paths. She smiled. I nodded. That was all. But something about it lingered. We kept bumping into each other after that. Her name was Elise. She was a photographer. Laughed like she didn't owe anyone an apology for existing. We talked casually. Lightly. I told her where I was from. She didn't pry about what brought me here. That was the gift. No excavation. Just presence. Eventually, I told her anyway. Not everything. Just enough. And she listened without trying to shape the story or fix it. That's when I realized something. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It grows quietly, like moss on stone, slow, certain, and inevitable if you just leave it alone long enough to settle in. I didn't need Elise to make me whole. I was already doing that on my own. But having someone walk beside me, not ahead, not behind, made it feel like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't an ending after all. It was a beginning. I didn't forgive Emily in some grand gesture. I didn't send her letters or revisit the ruins. I just stopped carrying her name into my future. She became a chapter one lived through, not one I owed anything to. And now? Now I wake up to a quiet I chose. I work a job I enjoy, read books that make me think, and talk to someone who doesn't expect me to be anything but who I am. There are no secrets, no passwords, no missing pieces, just breath and peace. So if you're hearing this, maybe you're the one who was left. Or maybe the one who finally left. Just know this. You don't need to set fire to your past to move forward. You don't need to make someone else hurt to heal. You just need to walk, steadily, softly toward a version of yourself that remembers how to breathe. Because when she disappeared for 24 hours, I thought it would break me. But when I disappeared, fully, completely, it finally set me free.